Hello, are you here to debate?
Yeah. Well, kind of. I got like 2 points.
All right,
More
what's
of
your
where you stand on it kind of thing.
sure? What's your name, age, and pronouns?
Johnny, 28, and he.
Okay, Johnny, what are your points?
Well, I guess since it was brought up by a previous caller, it was about the Second Amendment. So you brought up common sense gun laws. I kind of wanted to kind of understand what you mean by that.
Sure, yeah. I believe gun ownership should be very similar to like owning a car. I believe in order to own a gun, you need to pass specific safety. Like, I think you should take a written test. You should get a specific X amount of hours on a training course under the supervision of like a state sanctioned or like state approved gun supervisor. Um, and then like you should
So,
have to re up. You should have to re up this certification like once every like 2 to 3 years or so. Things like that.
okay, so kind of like getting your CCW.
Similar, yeah.
Okay. Um, Okay. Now, when it comes to, say, certain types of firearms, are you like, what's the limit do you think a person should be able to own?
I mean, I think there's obviously a limit. I don't know that I know enough about guns to make an informed point on that for like myself, but like obviously I don't think people should like be walking on the street with like a rocket launcher. Probably shouldn't have be walking on the street with like a
Okay.
Uzi or like a AK, things like that. I think personally for my taste, shotguns, handguns, and like hunting rifles are really where I would like say like that's what we can use. I think you can own other guns, but my idea would be like those guns you have to keep at like a range, like you get a locker at a range that you can keep your bigger guns at, and so you can still use them and shoot them for sport or for like things like that, but you can't use them like out and about, like because you don't need those are terrible guns to hunt with anyway, so like there's no purpose to use them
Well,
to hunt, so
it does depend because um, I've done a lot of firearms training. I have my CCW, and I've done through courses. I go to a range each week. I grew up in a military family, so I do agree that there is a distinction. So one of the things I always hear thrown around is assault weapons, assault weapons. So I think the general public is kind of misconstrued on what that really entails. So, for example, like you brought up the point of they're not very good guns to hunt with. Well, it depends on what you're talking about. If you're talking about a 7.62 NATO, which is what an AK-47 shoots, then yeah, I agree with you. But if we're talking about the AR-15, which is a 5.56, it's actually not too bad around to hunt with. I've hunted with it myself. Is it
but
great? No,
but
I'd
wait,
rather use a
but but
308.
but yeah, but this is my thing. Like the exit wound from an AR-15 is like huge. It just unless you're hunting only for sport. If you're hunting for like the meat, it would completely destroy the meat. Like it would be
No,
pointless to use.
no, I can attest from personal experience. It does not do that. And it also depends on what you're shooting with. Are you shooting with a hollow point? Are you shooting with a FMJ tracer? I mean, it also depends on what kind of round type. So, I mean, like a 308 round is a more powerful round than a 5.56, but I don't hear anybody screaming about every 308 gun being banned. Even though an AR-15, there are AR-15s that shoot 308. A lot of people. So, what I'm getting at, I guess, is so in 1986, Reagan passed the law that you could no longer own firearms that are fully automatic. Granted, that doesn't apply if you have a gun made before 1986. But so my opinion on that is, I think to a reasonable, like you said, I don't think you should be carrying around a rocket launcher because most people would get killed very easily because those are actually excessively dangerous and you have to have a lot of training to operate those. So yeah, I agree with that. And the same thing kind of goes with grenades and stuff. I can agree with that. Most people should have to pass a class. I do agree with that. I do think some exemptions. So like if you're a military officer, I don't see why you'd have to pass that. I mean, you could make
I
arguments
think
for
if
it, but I feel
you're
like
I think if you're like engaged in a profession like the military, in order to maintain, I would agree you don't need to you don't, and apparently everybody's saying that I'm wrong about the exit wound thing. Okay, I don't mind being wrong about that. I
no, no, yeah.
when
See,
it
that's why I like you because you're willing to let. you're willing to admit when you may not know something. And I noticed that a lot of callers on here with points that I may or may not agree with, doesn't really matter. A lot of the people I've noticed within the last like hour and a half is just super unprepared.
Yeah,
That's like, I'm not going to come in here talking about the communist capitalist thing because A, I don't really care that much about it, and B, I'd be lying if I said I was informed about that because I'm not. And I think a lot of people have been very dishonest with you tonight.
Yeah, like, well, all I would say, like, just back on the thing you had mentioned, when it comes to, like let's say somebody gets out of the military, I probably wouldn't need them to go through like training for certification, right? They would probably need to re-up, but like the initial certification, I would be like, yeah, you were in the military, it's fine. But I would say people who've been in the military or like high stress jobs like that, they would be required to take like a mental health test, like I'm sorry, if they have like severe PTSD, or if they have like some other thing that they go like
Some other mental
illness. Yeah, something specifically caused by the job, obviously, then I want them to take some sort of thing for that. I don't necessarily know that would need to be every year or every couple of years. And I mean, granted, I also believe like everybody should be doing this, but it would probably be designed differently if we know you're coming from like a high stress job like that. We would design it just a little differently because you just never know. I don't want to give instant kill button to somebody who, because of their role in the military has become suicidal, right? I don't want to give them an instant kill button. I want to give them help.
So it's interesting you bring up the mental screening thing because now I'm not sure if it's for all branches of the military, but my brother is a Marine, and when he got out of service, they actually did that for him. The first week he was out, he was required to. Now again, I don't know if that's for all military branches. That could just be a Marine thing.
Yeah,
but
I'm not sure.
I know for at least the Marines.
Like obviously, if you're just like if you're a cook, right? Like obviously, it's gonna be different. If you're, it might even be different if you're like you're there as like a military journalist or something like that. So it would obviously have to be individualized per the position, per like the things you saw, things like that. But I just case
to case basis.
Yeah, like I said, I would want to make sure that we're trying we're making sure that these people at the end of the day are safe, not only for themselves but for the people around them.
Okay, I think for the most part we kind of agree on the whole Second Amendment thing. So I'll move on to the next one.
Okay.
So it was. I was kind of curious about. So I agree that our prison system is completely fucked. Yeah, I'm not sorry if I'm not supposed to cuss on here. But
I have to reset my TikTok anyway, so feel free to cuss while the TikTok is down. They fucking flagged me, I guess, because we were talking about sensitive subjects. Well, it's whatever. Go ahead. But go ahead. Continue.
So yeah, I can agree that I think especially for like what you said, like white collar, drug related, and alcohol. Like I'm a recovering alcoholic, so I can speak to this. I can understand those situations doing rehabilitation. I completely agree with. What I kind of have an issue with is, and again, this isn't for all cases, but could you agree with me that some people are just inherently evil?
Well, I don't believe in the concept of evil per se, because I think evil doesn't exist.
Okay, let me reword that then.
Sure. I can answer. I can answer. You don't even need to. I can answer it. I believe that there are people who have compulsions that lead them to commit violent acts. And I believe that there are people whose brains will compulse them to do this, and there's no way out of this compulsion. Like they just have this compulsion. They're always going to want to do this. For the people like this, I would place into like long-term mental health care centers because their brains are broken. Their brains don't work properly.
Okay. Well, for an example, I do not believe under any circumstance a person like Ted Bundy could be rehabilitated. Same thing with God damn it, they just had a Netflix show about Dom. I don't think someone like him could be rehabilitated. And the reason I say that is because of just Dahmer's interactions in prisons and what the other prison inmates said, what he would do in prison. And yes, using prison as an example of rehabilitation is very bad. That's not really the point I was trying to make. I'm just saying, like, from
Yeah,
the
but
way
like I said, I
he
wouldn't.
is and thinks, I don't think someone like him. And the reason I don't think shipping them off to say necessarily a mental health institution forever is a good idea, because I don't believe that people should have to pay for a person like that can't be fixed.
So what are we
So I'm not
doing?
saying send them to prison either. I think I believe in euthanasia for those type of individuals. There's no suffering involved, because I do agree that prison systems are basically a torture center. So that's why I wouldn't send them to prison. I don't think they should be sent to a mental health institution, because A, they're not going to be rehabilitated, and B, it's coming out of everybody else's money.
Okay, so here's my overall issue. You think we should euthanize people because they have broken brains? You're trying to euthanize out an undesirable trait out of society. Do you know what that would be called?
They call it genocide.
No, it'd be not just genocide.
Well, maybe not. Go ahead.
Okay, so it would be called eugenics.
Okay.
You're trying to weed out
true.
a trait that you don't desire. Like, again, listen, I'm not going to sit here and be like, oh, yo, we need to protect Charles Dahmer or whatever, or Jeffrey Dahmer or whatever the fuck his name is, right? But, like, Jeffrey Dahmer's brain didn't work, right? Like, he had disorders that made it so that he did these violent acts, right? I don't think I'm not going to euthanize somebody whose brain is broken, right? I'm just going to put them in a place where they cannot harm themselves or others, and like give them mental health care.
See, I can maybe get behind the putting them in a place where they can't harm others, but the mental health care, I think, is a waste of time, because I feel individuals like this won't get any better.
Well, I don't care if
so
mental
really,
health care. I'm not in the when it comes to mental health care like this. I'm not in the business of making them better. I'm in the business of just treating them. I don't believe they can be cured of their mental health issues, but they can be treated.
Possibly, I can see where that could be a possibility. I think, especially now, but again, I do fully believe, for like white collar crimes and all that kind of stuff, sending people to prison for, well, anything over maybe not 6 months, but anything over a year, I think ruins a person's life completely. And I can attest to this because my father spent 3 years in jail for alcoholism. And I'm not going to say he's like poor, because, he has a house and stuff, but he's never been able to really, he's had to basically work for himself, and can't get a job, because he has a felony case for battery, which I don't necessarily believe that was true. But my point is that I think any person sent to prison or jail or whatever else for over a year, it essentially just ruins their life. So I can definitely agree with you that the prison system itself is very flawed, because I don't think there's any crime that restitutes a jail sentence over a year. Because and before, I know some people say, well, murderers, rapists, blah blah blah. I just don't think there's hope for those people. And in your opinion and your perspective, that is an interesting perspective, and I think it has merit. So yeah, no, and I guess I had one more, if that's cool. I don't want to keep you too long.
No, that's fine. Go
ahead. So the gender affirming care for kids. What's your stance on
it? My stance is really simple. Gender affirming care is a safe and effective treatment that lowers the rates of suicidality and increases positive mental health outcomes in all populations. So therefore, I would give it to children who need it, especially if they suffer from severe gender dysphoria.
Right. So my only issue with that, and this is, I have 3 kids myself. So my only issue with that is kids are very indecisive by nature. My 6-year-old doesn't know what her favorite color is of the week. She doesn't know what her favorite food is. Half the time it's macaroni, half the time it's chicken, half the time it's this. the indecisiveness of kids, if you can't allow a kid to smoke a cigarette till 18, or you can't allow a person to die in war until they're 18, drive a car till 16, I just think that there has to be a limit on the gender affirming care, because again, kids change their mind
Wait,
basically on the
but these
daily.
differences, right? The reason we don't let kids smoke is not because they're too young for it, right? Not, or at least too young in a capacity of like making the decision. The reason we don't let kids smoke is their
You're gonna say
lungs
it's
are
harmful, right?
well, yeah, their lungs are underdeveloped, so there is a direct harm coming from it. But again, when we look at the
Mhm.
like pubertal suppressants, hormonal replacement therapy, when we look at the outcomes of these and the risks involved in these, those risks do not outweigh the benefits of them. And in fact, most of those risks are very easily mitigated by just seeing a doctor regularly while you're on these treatments.
Right. And sure, that may be the case, but there are also plenty of cases where, you know, puberty blockers and transitioning, people have regretted it later in life. Now they can't have kids because they basically essentially sterilize themselves. And I'm not using that as a broad scope. I know there's different treatments for everybody. I'm just saying certain treatments lead to certain things.
Wait,
But the
but
point I'm getting at,
just really quickly, when we look at the regret rate, even amongst the population that are children, that regret rate is like 1 to 3%. 3% being like a really, if we're gonna be real conservative, 3%, but it's typically around like 1.2 to like 1.8% when we look at regret rate. So like if the regret rate is so small, why would I remove treatment for what 97% of people because possibly 3% of people might regret it?
no, I'd say that you wouldn't allow it till 18 because it can be a life altering decision, and I don't think any child should have full control over a life altering
But
decision.
the children aren't the ones making the life altering decisions. It's being made with parents, with doctors, with teams of people. And when you had talked about earlier that kids flip flop, when we look at like when we look at like gender identity issues and like gender incongruence and kids with gender dysphoria, it's actually really easy to make sure that they're not misdiagnosed, because what we look for is we look for persistence, consistence, and insistence. So we look to see if they've been persistent in their gender for 6 months or more. We look to see that they've been insistent on their gender and they have not flip flopped back and forth specifically for 6 months. And we look at consistency. So, right, we look to see that they consistently make decisions or are present themselves in this way. Like kids might be flip floppy, but kids aren't good at keeping up a lie for 6 months. If you've ever, I personally, I've talked to kids. They're not good at keeping up a lie for more than 5 minutes. It's right. They're this idea, this idea that kids don't understand their own identity. I just think it's just unfounded when we look at how gender develops in our brains.
I mean, that's fair, but at the same time, if I was being super, super like strict on the standpoint, like, okay, so a brain doesn't typically stop developing until about 22 to 25 years old. There's been different studies for each. I don't really care. That's just the general range.
So
It differs for
so
some females. It differs for some males. It
it's not
doesn't
that the
really
brain
matter.
stops
My
developing,
point
because the
being
brain, wait, just really
is,
quickly, the brain doesn't stop developing at like 25. Your brain always is developing. What happens is it like preens off neurons that you weren't using.
okay, right, right. So, but I guess my major point being is, even if it can be beneficial, why is it that you have to, instead of just like, so for example, if this person was to be called a preferred pronoun, right? You would say generally, well, okay, well, what's the big deal just affirming that for them, right? My question is why can't, say, if a kid comes and is consistent with it, why can't they be coached into the proper age? Say, again, let's just say it's 18 or 16. It doesn't really matter. Say it's a specific age. Why is it that we are incapable of coaching these people to say, hey, and before we do anything drastic or do we do anything towards your body or alter anything, how about we ride this out? We keep talking about it. We discuss options, and then when you're of the appropriate adult age, then
Because
we
the
can do it.
problem is because the
Why can't we
problem
just do
is
that?
because the problem is when you go through puberty and your body changes, it's going to exacerbate the gender dysphoria that you already feel. So if somebody who's a trans girl, right? If she already is displaying gender dysphoria prior to her body going through puberty, going through male puberty is going to exacerbate that gender dysphoria exponentially because now her body is going to start looking more male than it does look female. Because prior to puberty, we all sort of look the same, right? Uh, this would be the
So,
issue.
so, so on that. So what? But what if we're doing this to help stabilize them and prevent, the things you said it helps prevent? Why is it that we can't teach that, but through mental training? I mean, you can teach it.
We've
For
tried
example,
because that's
there
called.
is a
Wait,
Buddhist,
do you
and
know
this.
why we can't do that? Do you know why we can't do that? Because that's called conversion therapy, and kids kill themselves when we try to do this.
No, I'm not talking about change their mind. That's
But
not
you
what I'm
are.
saying. I'm
You're
saying
saying we need to
help
train
them
them
get
to.
through it with
We
a
need to train them.
stronger mental.
But wait, you're saying we need to train them to accept who they are right now and that they can change later. This is still a form of conversion therapy. Instead of accepting who they are now, or I'm sorry, instead of
Okay, what
being
I'm
able
saying is
to transition, we're saying they need to just accept who
it
they are currently.
well, if we boil things down, who they are currently is all up in your mind, right? So they already
I mean,
do accept who they are.
I would
I don't
disagree, but
feel that
somebody just
to
wrote.
affirm someone. I don't think you need to change your body physically because what's the point?
It's not about you affirming them with gender affirming care. It's about their own affirmation of themselves. But somebody did pay to boot you, so I got to move on. Everybody say W to Lily and then K space as well for the for both tipping. I forgot to mention K spaces before we came back, so let me just add both of those to the list.